Perfect. If you're here for Future of Creative Hiring, AI trends and tips for candidates, you're at the right session. So thanks all for joining us, and really looking forward to doing this session with LaDawn. I'm going to let LaDawn introduce herself as opposed to me trying to introduce here. LaDawn, I think you'll do a much better job of introducing yourself. And I'd also love for you to tell a little bit about what is Koto, the agency that you're working for now, the type of work and type of clients that you work with, just so that everybody in the room can get a feel for what an amazing speaker we have here with us today.
Alrighty. Thank you for the introduction, Ben, and hello to everyone here. And thank you so much for coming. So, very excited to be here with you all this evening and to chat a little bit more about recruiting in the age of AI. So to introduce myself, I'm LaDawn. I'm currently the talent director at Koto, which is a global design agency based in the UK. So our largest studio is in London, but I oversee North America and talent and recruiting for the New York and LA studios. And FYI, I'm based in Brooklyn in New York. So for all the New Yorkers here, hello. But yeah, I've been at Koto for the past several months, so I'm pretty new to the team. But previously, I worked at Red Antler, and I was there for more than 8 years, which is a very long time in agency world. But I was there for a long time, also primarily working as a creative recruiter, but my expertise also spans people operations, HR, talent. So pretty much all things people related. I would describe myself as a people person. So very much love doing what I do. And I think I'll have a lot of interesting insight for you all today. But that's a little bit about me. I'm originally from Louisiana. So hello to the person also here from Louisiana. And I went to college in North Carolina. So hello also to the person I saw who is in North Carolina. But very excited to be here with you all tonight.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself I was fumbling around here. Yeah. So yeah, today I think a few objectives that we hope that you'll take away from this session is understanding how AI is changing hiring within the creative landscape, the types of tools and the types of things that are being used, but also learning how to stand out during those processes because there's a change in process in how people are reviewing resumes and doing interviews and things like that. Um, Identifying a few skills for future success and then some practical steps for you to stay adaptable. So we'll dive right in. Well, Donna, I'll leave it. Or do you want me to introduce these surveys, perhaps?
Maybe let's start there. Yeah, maybe just a quick intro to
Yeah.
today.
So we recently at ABI, we recently produced a survey to our company partners. We work with over 300 company partners around the world within the creative industries. And what we wanted to know was, a few different things about their use of AI and how they're utilizing it specifically for recruitment, how it's impacting hiring. And one of the things that we asked them were how are they using it now for recruitment? So are they using it to process resumes, to process portfolios, for transcribing or summarizing notes from interviews, or for doing AI conducted interviews? And not that much use of AI from the partner companies that we work with, across the board, except for the notes that probably come automatically, from Zoom or from Google, those transcriptions. But we had about 9% using it for processing resumes. Looks like only a couple of, companies using it for reviewing portfolios, and same for AI conducted interviews. That being said, we also asked them, what do they expect in a year from now? Or I suppose it's more of a hope because they don't know yet how they're going to be utilizing it. And almost 50% of companies are looking to be using AI for processing resumes within 1 year from now. A quarter of those companies looking to be using it for reviewing portfolios, and 12% of companies trying to do AI conducted interviews. And I think this speaks to two things. Number one is, the rapid change of AI and its adoption by, you know, all different types of companies, because most of the companies that answered this were small to medium-sized firms, with under 20 people in those agencies. But also it speaks a bit to the challenge of being a recruiter. And maybe that will be something good for LaDawn to speak a little bit more about. But I'm not a recruiter, but I've hired a lot of people. And looking through resumes to hire people is really hard because it's hard to get through the sea and the blur of the words and everything that you see and really try to identify good quality talent without leaning on some things like, okay, what's their degree, which school did they go to, and where did they work before? You know, um, so I think that recruiters are looking to utilize AI tools just to help them speed up that process and to really filter out some of the profiles that don't seem to be a good fit from the start so that they can focus their time and effort and energy more on the profiles that are potentially good fit. And I think that this has some positives in the sense that it will help those recruiters to be more focused with the profiles that are trimmed down and pre-selected for them so that they can look a little bit deeper. But there's also some potential for bias. There's potential for, sorry if somebody's not unmuted, if you don't mind putting yourself on mute, find. There's some potential for bias. There's some potential also for missing a great profile who would be a good fit for that company, but didn't quite meet the keywords, that were plugged in to be met, by that AI program. So LaDawn, I leave it with you from here, and I'll go back to the next part once we get to the next slides of data. Yeah.
All right, sounds great. Thank you so much. And I'll take it from here. So definitely retweet a lot of what Ben just shared. And obviously, through the course of tonight, we'll dive into a little bit more of that into detail. But as Ben mentioned earlier, right now, obviously, AI is still rapidly evolving. Some companies have utilized it much quicker than others. It's only about 9%, for example, of places or agencies using it to screen resumes, but fast forward in a year, there's a lot of ambition for that to jump maybe upwards to 46% or almost half. So I think what we should all keep in mind is that a lot is changing. There's a lot evolving. It can be very overwhelming. It can certainly be a lot to stress about, especially as you're thinking about your job search and starting to apply for roles and interview and all of that stuff. But honestly, have no fear. I think that, of course, it's impossible to stay on track with everything happening within the AI landscape. But I do think that we all should keep in mind that it's a common tool. It's here. There's not much any of us can do about it. So the main thing we have to accept is that things are changing, and ultimately we just have to change our behavior. So working in creative, as many of you do, is all about storytelling. And while your resume might first be viewed by an algorithm and not a human, which is slightly upsetting, but at the end of the day, I think that as creatives, you all have innate talents of telling stories, of really trying to connect with consumers. And I think that ultimately is the heart of a lot of what you all do. So as you're interviewing, having conversations with potential employers, don't forget that honestly, AI is really a starting point. It shouldn't be a substitute. And ultimately, you should be using your mind and your brain and your critical thinking skills to really indicate to an employer why they should hire you. So don't forget that it's something that's meant to be an aid or a supplement, but it's not the end all be all. Next slide. So, what are companies' attitudes towards AI? So, this is future state. Again, a lot of agencies or studios might not be there yet, but it is a dream state to have more and more people required to use AI, or at least you're encouraged to use it, or it's optional. And to give just a really quick personal anecdote, my last agency before Koto was very heavy on encouraging people sometimes forcing people to use AI. And I think ultimately, as you're conducting your job search, your own level of comfort with using AI can absolutely dictate the sorts of companies that might be attractive to you based on how they're utilizing AI. But I think regardless, as we can see here from this slide, again, it's something that's here. It's a change that's here. It's very present for all of us. And ultimately, AI is not going anywhere anytime soon. So this is really an opportunity for you all to think about how AI can be an aid to you, how it's something that you can use as an advantage, and how are the different ways AI can be an instrument toward finding the right sort of job or doing the type of work that's most interesting. So again, stay ahead of the curve, understand what's out there, understand what new tools are coming onto the scene or the market beyond what's there now. But ultimately, AI is not going anywhere. So instead of making it an enemy, make it your friend. Next slide. So adaptability is the creative superpower. And I think this is really important because, again, as more and more companies are moving from this is optional to you actually maybe need to use I think that this is an opportunity to really think about the different ways where AI can be, again, used as an advantage. So this should not replace your thinking. This should not replace your own methodology when it comes to design or your own personal approach. This is, again, a tool to be used for experimentation. Use AI responsibly. How can you experiment with the tool? How can you explore with the tool? How can you use it to expand your current creative process? So ultimately, you should still absolutely, again, think about how you can show up as your best self in an interview or in conversations, but ultimately, it's really important that you can also speak to how AI is something that's in your creative toolkit. Next slide. This is a biggie. As someone who obviously is a recruiter and working in the talent space, again, AI is something that absolutely should be something that you're experimenting with, that you're staying abreast of, and keeping in the loop on. But ultimately, be as human as possible in an increasingly automated world. So I think that as AI becomes more common, is something that you're using more, other people around you are using more. Don't forget that, again, AI is something that's meant to be a supplement. It shouldn't fully replace how you work, how you think. And ultimately, when you're showing up for an interview, what is going to matter most is if you can actually connect with the people you're talking to. And I do think that it's often forgotten that when you're interviewing for a role, you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. It's a two-way street. So ultimately, I think it's really important to understand what's exciting for you. What are you looking to learn? What's the right sort of team environment for you? And ultimately, it's all about choosing a place that will allow you to show up as your best self at work every single day. So, really try to connect with a team, really try to understand if it's a place where you can be successful. And ultimately, AI is really just there to maybe help you land the interview. But once you're in the interview, be as human as possible and really approach the interview with as much curiosity and communication as possible. So, some tactical tips on how to structure your resume to maybe get through AI or an algorithm. So, I will preface, I'm one of the throwback old school recruiters who actually does review every single resume. So, I'm not using AI to screen resumes. I'm actually looking myself and looking at portfolios myself, but obviously cannot vouch for other recruiters out there. But ultimately, there are some things that you can do to help your resume stand out a little bit more. So the first one is keep it structured and scannable. Don't overcrowd your resume. Don't have so much text that is overwhelming for a recruiter to read it. Make sure that what you're including on your resume is succinct and digestible, and that is something that someone can look at quickly. It shouldn't take an hour for a recruiter to look at your entire resume. It should be pretty bite-sized, I would say. Also, make sure that all of your headers and sections on your resume are super clean. There's consistent formatting. Make sure that it's super tight because ultimately, if a recruiter is having to jump all over a resume to read your resume, more than anything, it's just super distracting. And it obviously takes my attention away from what you probably want me to focus on about your experience. Um, Use keywords strategically. I think this is a big one. So if you're applying for a job, I think obviously table stakes, really make sure that you're looking at the job description. Really make sure that you understand what the job is, what the responsibilities are, what the expectations might be. And then you can infuse some of that language in your resume. So while, of course, it's totally fine to have one standard resume, and that's primarily what you're using throughout your job search, it is sometimes nice to specifically tailor a resume to a job that you're applying for. So if the job, for example, is using a lot of keywords, whether that's, let's say, motion, digital, strategy, then those might be words to make sure you include on your resume. And this is not a you should lie and add it in just for fun. This is truly if it's obviously corresponding to the experience you have. So just make sure that your resume is actually aligning with the language used in the job description and there's some sort of mirroring. And then this is if and when appropriate, not necessary, but if you have quantifiable results that you can share on your resume, that obviously is something that AI would pick up on pretty quickly. So let's say that you worked on a project and it led to 20% of X. That could be something worth including if you have that metric. Because obviously AI is data driven. So if you do have those points of data you can include on your resume, that's a bonus. But again, that's if appropriate, not always necessary, but it is something worth shouting out. But ultimately, this is again just a way for you to structure your resume just to get through an AI scan. Or if a lot of companies are using AI to review resumes. But of course, always a case by case situation, and you should use your judgment. And one other quick thing I'll mention, and this is really just around like how to use AI in terms of a resume or just kicking off a job search. AI actually comes in really handy in that regard. And that could be for maybe getting feedback on your resume. Slap it in, see what AI says. And you can even have it mapped against the job you're maybe applying for. So you can take the job description from online, upload that alongside your resume, and AI can also help you gauge if it ladders to what the job description is. I also think it's a great tool for research. So maybe you just want to know the top 5 agencies that work with large entertainment companies, just an example. That could be something you use AI to delve into. It could also be also for questions to ask. It also could just be to help you compile a list of different projects or things to reference. So I do think that's something that comes in pretty handy is using it as a part of your research when you're prepping for an interview or to have a conversation with a potential employer. All right, how to succeed in interviews. Something I love to talk about. So, I've been in many interviews and not related to what's on the slide. We'll go through each point by point, but kind of what we talked about earlier. In this age of AI and technology, be a normal person. I think that it's really easy to get in your head when you're interviewing and you want to make sure you're saying the right things and you're doing the right things. But ultimately, I just want to chat and I want to get to know you. And most people interviewing you feel the same. So show up as your best self, present as your best self, and ultimately know that it should be fun. It should be enjoyable. Is you connecting with another human who wants to spend that quality time with you. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. It's just good practice. And practice meets perfect, right? So definitely come to the conversation with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. do your research in advance, and also too come with questions. That's a huge flag for me if I end a conversation with someone and they don't have any questions. So definitely make sure that you're digging beneath the surface and coming to an interview with some questions to ask, because ultimately, as much research as you can do, you're not going to have every single question answered. And the people in the room with you in an interview, whether it's Zoom or in person, those are the people that you really want to talk to get kind of the sneak peek or peek behind the curtain, if you will. So, how to succeed in an interview. So, if you're sharing your work, again, in this age of AI, it can be really easy to just fall back on AI. It's kind of a lazy way to get through a lot of things. But again, you should use AI strategically. And ultimately, whenever you are in an interview sharing your work, you really should be capable of explaining your thought process, your design approach, why you made certain decisions. An example I like to use as a very simple example is if an interviewer is like, oh, like, why did you choose the color red? You should never say, because I like the color red. That's not a good answer. So ultimately, it's really about why are you making certain decisions? What led you from point A to point B? And what's the meaning behind this design decision? It's really important. So make sure that you can really talk through that. How did you approach the problem? First of all, what was the problem? Can you identify what that was? And then talk through the steps of how you got to a solution. So make sure that you're really critically thinking about what the problem is you're trying to solve with design and how it got you to your end result. As we talked about a little bit earlier, talk about your relationship with AI. And that could be, I don't know a ton, but I'm curious to learn more. It could be that it's something you use for ideation and exploration. It could be that you're a super user and you love trying all of these different and new tools. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you're a beginner or if you're proficient or advanced, but I do think that now, because as we saw earlier, more and more employers are looking for people who are using it, are comfortable using AI, are maybe going to be required to use it. I do think it's a nice bonus when you can talk a little bit about how you are using AI as part of your creative process. Earlier talking about be human. Yes, focus on interpersonal skills. Be curious, be a strong communicator. Make sure that you're actually connecting with people you're talking to on a deeper level, because that is going to carry you much, much farther throughout your career versus you being advanced with AI. While that is absolutely a plus and a bonus in today's world, ultimately, if you can't actually collaborate with people in real time and be a really strong team player, you're going to have a hard time being successful in the workplace. And lastly, emphasize your creative decision making and critical thinking skills. So, again, kind of laddering back to the first bullet, but explain why you made certain choices. What made you excited about the design choice you made? What's interesting about the design choice you made? I think it's really important to maybe talk about how AI was an aid making that decision, or how you were able to explore or experiment using AI, but ultimately you have to be able to use your brain to actually talk about the thought process behind that. So, those are some things about being in an interview setting, but ultimately it's okay. It's not scary. It's not meant to be scary. It's all about finding a good fit, and only you know what that right fit is for you. So, some actionable tips. All right, tip one, experiment with new tools early and adapt to new platforms. So, as I mentioned earlier, stay abreast of how the landscape is changing. That could be with AI, it could be with other sorts of tools in the creative space. Obviously, within the past couple of years, everyone has started using Figma. Figma, when I first started in creative recruiting, was not a thing at all. So I do think that it is important to just stay abreast of how the industry is changing, what are the new tools you can use and experiment with, because ultimately it's always impressive when you're an early adopter and when you can point to how you're comfortable experimenting with new things and elevating your design approach and process. Show curiosity and reflection. And that could be in a lot of different ways. It could be curiosity about AI. It could be how to use more AI, trying different tools. It could also be reflecting on, I did this thing and it didn't work. So now it's an opportunity to try something else. I also like to say that this is a big get off your computer. I think that in design, or if you are a creative, there's so much you can learn and be inspired by in the real world. So take a step away, get out in the real world and see what's out there that's really inspiring to
Close
you.
your eyes.
And ultimately, pull that into your work, have that reflected in your work. But ultimately, you're not going to be the very best creative you can be if you're researching and experimenting purely online. Um, Keep yourself immersed. Kind of similar to tip one, but know what's going on. This could be you having regular chats with your friends who are also in the creative space. That could be just understanding what's happening in the industry, how things are changing. This could be understanding what different companies are interested in and looking for. This could be, again, trying a different approach, using a new tool, but ultimately, don't get tunnel vision. Don't lock yourself into what you already know. I think that we can all learn. There's always something new to try. And ultimately, you shouldn't be afraid to shake things up. And tip four, update your portfolio as much as you can. So ultimately, of course, a lot of people don't do this, and for various reasons, everyone has a different personal situation. But I do think it's nice, especially as you're experimenting with new things, you're adapting to different tools. It's nice to have that evident in your work. Otherwise, it's not helpful to you. So if you are trying a new tool, trying a different method, put it in your portfolio. And I think this also expands to just different skill sets within design. So right now, I would say, especially with a lot of emphasis on digital and motion, even if you're primarily, let's say, a brand designer, if you are illustrating, if you are doing animation, if you are creating websites, those are still very helpful things to include in your portfolio or in your portfolio because it shows that you have range. It shows that you're someone who's multifaceted, and it shows that you're not thinking about design in a linear way. You're really thinking about it in a 360 manner. So I do think whether it's a skill set, platform, show what you're doing. And I think also to map out your approach, show again how you got to a decision, show how you made something. It's nice to kind of see the thinking in your portfolio as well. But ultimately, don't let your portfolio become outdated. You want it to be as up to date and reflective of your current skill set as possible.
Awesome. So thank you so much, LaDawn, for those tips and pointers, and for this entire section. This is great, and I've got a lot of questions for you. And I think for everybody that's here in the call as well, please go ahead and start popping. I see there's a few good questions here already, but any questions that you have for LaDawn or about AI, about recruitment in general, now's the time to ask. It's a great chance to be able to get to speak with a talent director and somebody within your field and have your questions answered. In the meantime, I'm going to take just a quick break to talk about ABI. Of course, that's partly what we're here for, is to talk about our Outbound Initiative. So I'm going to go through this really quick so that I can leave time for those questions. Just a quick introduction about us. Our Outbound Initiative is a global career accelerator for creatives. So that means that we want to support students and recent graduates in getting your career started and kind of bridging that gap between what you've learned in university and really getting your foot in the door within the industry. We're an internship placement program, but we do so much more than internship placement, a lot of professional development and coaching. So the way that you can think of us, we're like an extra course that you take outside of your university, but we offer so much more value and practical implementation. We're going to help you start your career, focusing on career readiness and network building and internship placement. And we're a small program, so we have a lot of dedicated hands-on support for each of our participants. Who's the program for? students and recent graduates if you're looking to get started in the creative industries or if you're looking to do an internship internationally, because that can be challenging either coming to the US or going outside of the US. International students who are already in that destination. So, international students in the US on a F1 or in the UK on a tier 4 or in Australia on a 485 visa, or students who are looking to do an internship for academic credit. So these are all good examples of where our program would become of great use for those of you who are interested. We have internship destinations, 5 in the US: New York, Chicago, LA, Miami, and Austin. We also have London, Berlin, Melbourne, Sydney, and a virtual option if you want to do something virtually. And then there's a few program inclusions. So we are a paid program, like a paid course. So you should know everything that you're getting out of it should you choose to join. A few things. Number one, you're going to get the ABI Academy. So the ABI Academy is a prep course that happens prior to your internship placement, and it's built only for practical, real implemented advice so that we can prepare you for the interview and placement process, and then we can prepare you for the internship. We'll be working with you on your resume, your portfolio, your interview skills, and also your career, readiness and interview readiness. And this is done together with coaches within the industry, including LaDawn, who's one of our coaches, has and does work with us. And then in module 2 as well, you'll be preparing for the internship. This is a combination of live coaching sessions, content that you watch online, and also some preparation, like making sure your portfolio and resume is ready. Totally built for full-time students, about 3 to 4 hours of time per week. Some of our industry experts, Justin and Jen, Warner Brothers, MTV, Paramount, Kevin with Omnicom Group, Michael with Ralph Lauren. I saw there are a few fashion majors here. Shonda, who's founder and CEO of Salt and Light Agency, and Jazz, who's the director of global social media marketing at Shutterstock. So some great coaches for you to learn from and receive advice from throughout the program. Now, item number 2 that you get in the program is a guaranteed internship placement. We work with over 300 company partners around the world. Last year, we had 260 participants come through the program, and 100% of them received an internship placement within their fields and destinations. So we're really good at making it happen. Now, we don't have control over the hiring process. We're not LaDawn. We're not the one who's there making the final decision, but we do have a relationship with those company partners, and our job is to make sure that your profile stands out on its own merit, that it's really strong. So that's why we're working with you in the previous component, the ABI Academy, to make a really strong profile and then get your resume to the top of the stack, basically. But at the end of the day, those companies are still going to hire you based on that connection, feeling like you're a good fit for the company. Internships can be between 3 to 6 months in duration. They could be part-time or full-time. They could be for credit or experience. We can't guarantee paid internships. It's a challenge that you'll face through us, or if you go individually. We're a small program. We definitely try to influence this, but it's something that we like to be upfront about from the very beginning. Internship types that you can do through the program: entertainment and media, design, marketing, advertising, fine arts, or fashion. And when you come through and do an interview with us, you'll be selecting 3 or 4 top types of internships and a couple of backups. And we're able to find for 85 to 90% of our participants internships within their top choice destination and types of internships. Item number 3 that you get in the program is dedicated support. So our program coordinators will help you with interview preparation, recruitment preparation, your resume and portfolio reviews. Our placement coordinators will be the ones placing you with an internship and making sure that you have enough interviews to receive an offer, and working with you on travel, like visa preparation and insurance. And then our in-city coordinators will be there meeting you for an orientation, also doing events, and then there for emergency contact. And last but not least, you have access to our creative community. This is all of our alumni in an app, and events as well. And I think networking is a big piece of getting your career started, and you're going to do it no matter you go through us or not, but we just want to shortcut it for you. And also, that can help propel your career. Meet some people who have been through the program 3 or 5 or 10 years ago. We've placed over 1,000 people through the program. So, great place to say, hey, I see now you're a manager at, such and such agency. I'd love to connect. You went through the program. I want to learn how you got to where you are now. So a great place to shortcut that. We do have a tuition. So if you're doing our program locally or virtually, it's 2250. If you're going internationally, it's 3250. That includes all the things I mentioned before, but it doesn't include visas, flights, housing, or things that are external. But it does include our program and the four components that I mentioned. And we do have a grant. So we have a grant that's between $500 up to the full program tuition for financial needs-based students. And that's for our local and virtual programs. So you can apply for that as well when you're applying for the program. And there's information about that on our website. Our next upcoming deadline is December 10th, especially if you're looking to do something next summer. So I highly recommend if you're thinking about doing the program, if you think this might be right for you, potentially just go ahead and apply. There's no fee to apply. The next step would be to set you up for an interview, which we'll do once we review your application. Then you'll receive a result, where you accept it or not. And then you can make a decision whether or not you'd like to join. So you can do all those steps before making a decision without any fees and just see, hey, maybe this is something I explore and see whether it's something that might be right for me next summer. Because of the placement process and the preparation, we need a lot of time to get you placed for the summer. So if you're thinking like, hey, next summer I'm thinking about doing an internship, I would go ahead and apply and get that in early since we work on a rolling admissions basis. I'm going to show you really briefly our application page. So if you go to our website and you click apply on the top right, you'll see the things that you need. You need a resume, a portfolio if you have one, a couple of academic references, a personal essay. Please write it yourself, not with ChatGPT. We want to get to know you. And then if you're planning to apply for the grant, all the information is there. And then when you hit start your application, you'll just fill out the form with all your personal information, your education history, the internship information. Don't stress about this being final. We're going to talk about it in interview and discuss what's the right plan for you. Just put what you think you might want to do for now. And then you hit submit, and our team will get back to you with a date for an interview and to help set up an interview. So I'm just going to put that in the chat now in case that's of interest for you. And then I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can get back to all these wonderful questions. And I would love to, oh, Leah, great. I'm happy to see that you already applied for the program. Fantastic. If you're looking for an email, look in your junk folder because sometimes it goes to spam. So now we're going to get back to questions. And I want to get to all these questions here, but I have one maybe first question for you, LaDawn, for myself, which is when you're looking at an applicant,
Mm-hmm.
from the resume and also everything else, can you tell us like what are the things that you look for and what's the weighted importance of those things? Like what are the things that really make it for you of like, oh, this could be a really good candidate for us? And then what are the things that break it for you? The things that you're like, no, no way, like can't move forward. That didn't work out well. Can you give some tips and tricks so that people can figure out like, okay, where do I focus my time and effort when I'm applying for things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I typically, unlike probably most creative recruiters, I actually tend to look at someone's portfolio first and not their resume. So obviously not to at all shortchange the importance of a resume because it is, but ultimately, especially if you are someone who has a book of work, that's most importantly what I want to look at. I want to get a sense of whether or not your work is a good fit for my company, what my company is looking for, and then from there, I will take a look at the resume. And that's primarily a way for me to avoid bias. I do think that sometimes recruiters can get tunnel vision, and if you don't have certain agencies or companies listed on your resume, it can sometimes be an automatic no, which I think is unfair. I think it's really important to give all applicants a chance. And ultimately, even if someone's resume doesn't scream being the perfect fit for the job. I think that many times over my career, I've seen people who have absolutely been all stars, but maybe judging from their resume, they would not have been. So I do
Hmm.
think that it's really important to, again, ensure that your portfolio is up to date and that it's a reflection of not just the work you've done, but also a reflection of the work you like to do. I think that for resumes, again, if it's 2 pages, super small print, a ton of text, it's overwhelming for me. It's a lot to digest. I think that, again, you want to make sure that your headers and sections are clean and succinct and that you're sharing your experience in a pretty abbreviated but sharp way. So don't overcrowd your resume. I do sometimes search for keywords. I know we talked a little bit about that earlier. I do think that that is something that's important, especially if it's a job or a role that really focuses on a certain type of work or very much is emphasizing that you have certain skills. So I do think that that's really important. But other than that, there's nothing that is usually just a blatant, oh my gosh, this is awful. Or it's really just making sure that the resume feels relevant and that, again, it's not too much information because basically, the resume is a tease. It's a way to hook someone's attention, but you don't need to share your life story on your resume. It should be to the point, and when you hopefully have an interview, that's when you can go into more detail and elaborate.
Hmm. And you mentioned having questions ready for the interview. Are there some questions that are like kind of forbidden or things that you would say like when you hear those questions, you're like, maybe not the right fit for us, or are all questions on the table?
Yeah. I mean, I would say for the most part that most questions are on the table, but I do think that, for example, it can be pretty obvious when you haven't done any research. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that my company is based in the UK. If you do any sort of research on my company, you'll see that we're based in the UK. So, if you're like, oh, yeah, like what other offices are there besides New York? I would then think, oh, okay, you didn't do any homework before this meeting. So, I would
Hmm.
say things that are blatantly obvious that you could find out from a company's website that is not obviously off the table, but it is kind of a side eye if you do
Yeah.
ask it. But I do think that most questions are great. I think a lot of questions will stem around cultural vibes. That's obviously a pretty common question, but it's a good one. It's an important one. And I think obviously no obvious questions about the job. You want to also make it seem obvious that you actually looked at the job description. So if you're like, what is the title? I would be like, okay, that's odd.
Yeah. All right.
So not any
More
like
detail.
crazy egregious mistakes like that. But other than that, I would say most questions are on the table.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Great. Jack asked, do you recommend using AI for, and I think you answered this, but you can just touch on it again. Do you recommend using AI for resume and cover letter polishing and revision, or do you believe it can look bad to employers if they notice?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say that most recruiters aren't going to be like, this is all AI or not. I think that ultimately it's less about did you use AI and it's more about if the resume is an actual reflection of your work. I think it's totally fine to use AI to fine-tune your resume, but I think that the meat of the resume should be you and your experience,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't fudge, you shouldn't obviously use AI to totally generate a resume. That's odd. I think that it's mostly I got my resume 80% there. This
Mhm.
is encompassing what I've done. This is very truthful to the experience I have. And then, if anything, AI can be used as a way to check for spelling errors to see if maybe you can share something a little bit differently, or maybe just to give tips and advice for strengthening your resume. But it
Mm.
should not be a I'm using AI to completely generate the entire resume. Because then, if you actually, let's say, get an interview with your fake resume, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is I think make sure you um just it's I can I it's so many times that I see essays written to us that are like copy paste but haven't been proofread. So
Mm,
if you're copying something from AI, make sure that you remove the bits that were meant as part of the prompt or part of the header. Make sure that things are spelled correctly because they might spell things incorrectly. I've seen Earthbound Initiative for us and things of that sort. So,
mm,
then I know immediately that you had zero review of that essay before you hit send, and it becomes a negative point. But otherwise, I think as you're saying, like just using it for a bit of revision is fine.
mhm.
Um, Emily asked, what is the best way to leverage whether a recruiter wants to hear in an interview that you use AI regularly versus someone who isn't a big fan of someone who constantly uses AI? So how do you know whether the recruiter is looking for somebody who utilizes AI or not? And then how do you adjust yourself accordingly?
Yeah. I mean, I would hope that in that job description that they're stating within the JD how much or how often it would be required to use AI. And I would say that in most job descriptions, it's listed. And if it's super important to a company, I promise you it will be listed. And I would say that if it's not, you can maybe take that as an indication that it's maybe a nice to have or something that's a bonus, but it's not required. But I do think that's another question to come to an interview with if it's not clear from the job description. Ask the recruiter or the person, what's the company's stance on AI? How frequently are AI tools used? What is the company's philosophy around AI usage? I think that's a very important and good question to ask if it's unclear. And I think that ultimately, again, I think it's good to demonstrate your status with AI. And that could be, again, you're being truthful and saying, I know about different AI tools. I know about chat. I know about Midjourney, whatever, but I haven't experimented much, but I'm curious to learn more. Or if you've used it a ton, it's an opportunity to showcase how sophisticated you are with using AI tools. So I think there's no right or wrong answer with how proficient you should be with AI, but I do think that it's nice to mention or share, like, this is something I've experimented with and I would like to keep learning. Or I use it all the time, and this is how I use it. So I think it's good to come to a conversation keeping that in mind. And again, if it's unclear, just ask.
Cool, great. Um, Let me go through. Okay, I think you've kind of already mentioned this, but how noticeable is the use of ChatGPT as a recruiter? What
Hmm.
strategies do you have to make it go unnoticed?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, kind of similar to the other question. I wouldn't say that I look at most resumes and I'm like, oh my gosh, it screams AI. But at the same time, I do think that again, the resume should be as honest and expressive of your experience as possible. And I think that it's fun. I enjoy personally when people add like personal tidbits on their resume, like things that you maybe have as hobbies outside of work, or having, again, kind of a blurb that just explains who you are, what your experience is, and what you're looking for. So, kind of a summary. So, I think that if it's just pure text and it feels very analytical and very data driven, that to me is just boring. There's no
Yeah,
personality. And I
yeah,
do think that it's nice when your resume, again, is giving a snapshot of who you are, but isn't telling me everything because you gotta leave something to wonder, right?
yeah, yeah. Something for the interview, right?
For the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very specific question, but our school recommends using AI resume editor called VMock. Have you heard of it? What's your opinion on this tool?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with VMock. So it's not something I've used before, and I don't know of anyone who uses it, and my company doesn't. So unfortunately, I am not an expert to answer that question. But I would say that if that is advice you're getting, obviously do your due diligence and do a little bit more research. But I think that again, in the game of AI, there's no right or wrong answer. I think that ultimately it's less about black and whites and it's more about preferences. So I think it's a matter of the role you're applying to, the company you're applying for. I think that obviously you want to make sure that you're keeping in step with what the requirements are, but ultimately don't feel bad if you're like, I don't know what that is and I haven't used it before. It's fine.
Yeah, and I think the tool doesn't matter so much as the content, like what you were saying,
Yeah.
right? Like AI is great to maybe have you tweak a little bit of the maybe choice of words that you're using, or
Hmm.
also like helping you highlight some like, oh, this, you didn't put any you didn't put any outcomes in your job description, what you did in your
Right.
job. Like maybe you want to add some of the outcomes or some of the things that you achieved, right? So it can kind of flag things for you. But ultimately you want to look over your resume yourself and be like, am I proud of this? Does this look good? Does it sound like me? Because at the end of the day, if it really doesn't sound like the way you talk either, maybe you might want to adjust it a little bit, so that it really, your personality comes through a little bit. So it doesn't really matter too much the tool. Probably your school has a deal with VMock and wants everybody to use it. Uh, uh, so let's see. I use ChatGPT to help me create small steps to achieve my ambitious career goals. My college career center discourages it, which is understandable. How can I go about this? I don't know why it would be discouraged. I think it sounds like a good way to break down some of your career steps and think about strategically about what are the ways that you want to go about it. Maybe what they're trying to have you do is think, critical think by yourself and think what are the steps that you want to do is the only reason I could imagine that they would be discouraging that. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
utilizing tools to help you brainstorm, to help you think around corners that you haven't thought about yet or see blind spots is a great way to use it, as opposed to just having it think for you, right? As being like, this is my plan. Does this make sense? Is it a plan that works well? Are there steps in this that are going to be really challenging? Did I miss a step that I might not be seeing right now? Those are great ways to use it, but don't just say, hey, what's my life going to be? And leave it to ChatGPT.
Yeah, no, 100%. Absolutely what Ben just said. And again, it's not meant to be a substitute. AI is totally meant to be a starting point. It's an add-on, it's a supplement, but you shouldn't say, tell me what my goals are. It's really about using it as a way to fine-tune what you're working on or just using it as an exploration tool, but it doesn't replace your critical thinking, or it shouldn't.
Yeah, great. And we've got time for probably the last three questions here. So Alyssa asked, basically they like to draw anime illustrations, but they're a graphic designer. Should they put it in their portfolio or should they leave it out, or how should they adjust that? How should they deal with that within their portfolio?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that if that's primarily your design expertise or field, it's fine to include. I think that if it's not relative or appropriate for what you're hoping to evoke through your portfolio, then don't include it. So I think that's just kind of up to you. But I do think that, again, your portfolio should be tailored to the sorts of jobs you want. So if you're like, I want to be an animator and I'm primarily hoping to apply for those types of jobs, and it makes sense to maybe include something like that. But I would say the other thing is your portfolio should have an underlying theme.
Hmm.
It shouldn't be all over the place. Like you don't want someone to look at your portfolio and think, okay, I actually don't know what this person does. I think if anything, it's making sure that your portfolio is organized. Like maybe you have a section for personal stuff, which personally I like to see personal work in people's portfolios because I very much understand that maybe what you're working on at a company is not indicative at all of the things that you want to be working on because, of course, corporate jobs, you might be working on things you don't care about. But I do think that it is nice to keep things organized so it's very clear the message you're trying to share with a potential employer.
Great. Yeah, I think that's very good advice. So it depends on what you're going for basically and how you want people to view you. Um, And then I think this is a very good one. As someone who does a lot of freelance, my resume is 2 pages. How can I make sure everything is there without it being too much? It looks easy to read still and not too wordy. I think probably they're listing every freelance as a separate job, maybe grouping it together as freelance work with clients. How would you suggest going about that?
Yeah, I know. I feel like it was such a thing a long time ago. No 2 pages. And I would say 1 page is still ideal, but also too, I think especially as you become more tenured in your career, sometimes it's unavoidable that you're going to have maybe 2 pages. But as Ben said, you don't need to share every single thing. If you've been freelancing for, let's say, 5 years and you've worked with 20 different agencies, maybe you just list select agencies or the agencies you're most excited to say you worked at or for, and then maybe a couple of like key clients. But I agree, you don't need to include every single thing. So it could literally just be freelance 2014 to 2025, and then it could be select clients
Hmm.
agencies. Like I think there is a way to abbreviate all of that information and not include again every single thing because again, if I'm looking at every single thing, I'm going to get bored pretty fast.
Yeah. And Angel mentioned freelance and multidisciplinary, but I think still you can separate based on the discipline, or you can mention the different disciplines if they're related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to say, skills, illustration, branding, like you can list some of the things that you've touched throughout your freelance career. But again, you don't have to list every single bits and bob.
Yeah, and the other advice would be like if you really want to know how your resume comes across, give it to like five people, like professors or other
Mhm.
people, for a minute and then take it back and be like, what'd you take away from it? Because
Yeah.
they might be like, wow, that was a lot. You want them to walk away saying, oh, I understood that you studied this and you have these types of skills and you've practiced them for this amount of time. They say recruiters look at resumes for 7 seconds or 10 seconds. Probably if they like the resume, they're going to take a longer look at it and kind of deep
Yeah.
dive on it. But on the initial glance, toss, keep, toss, keep, toss, keep, right? Because there's so many resumes that are coming through. You don't want to be in a toss pile just because it was just hard to read and there's just too much going on. You want to like let them do a little bit of a deeper look and then understand what's going on. As long as you can understand what is being said on your resume, it's okay to kind of group things. Just think that another human is reading it as well. Yeah, awesome. I'm happy you took that away from it. Great. So we've got 1 minute left. So the last thing I'm going to do here, again, if you're thinking about applying to the program, please application this month, so we can review it. I'm also going to put out our LinkedIn so that you can connect with us. Please feel free to connect, send me a message if you have any questions about applying to the program or something like that, or any professional development questions. I've always tried to get to all questions and happy to answer them. So connect with me online, build your network. And thank you so much for coming to the session. And thank you, LaDawn, for hosting and for speaking with us today. This was really great and I think very insightful.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw in my company as well, just for people to
Yeah.
take a peek at if they're
If you
curious.
haven't checked out Koto, look at their client list. It's very impressive.
Yeah, so take a look, everyone. But thank you again for having me. It's been such a pleasure sharing some words and thoughts with you all. And please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm always happy to send any responses over email or LinkedIn to any additional questions. But thanks for having me.
Awesome. Bye, LaDawn. Bye, everybody. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Best of luck.
Bye.
Bye.